Previously on Outpost 13 Hockey.
Well, hey there, hockey friendos. I think if you're one of the elite 30,000 people who've ever watched me on YouTube, you will know I'm not somebody who likes to sit in front of a camera. However, I am going back to sea in a couple of days, and I thought it would be fun to do an actual final predictions, because my previous videos for the run-up to the season weren't really predictions. The Vibes video is kind of more like where all the franchises are at the moment. So this is going to be more like my just predictions of what I expect will happen this season specifically. By the time you watch this, I will be already away at sea. I'm planning on releasing this about 3 weeks after the season starts. So by then, all of this will be totally out of date and probably will show how badly my predictions are going. But it is what it is. As you can see, I'm incredibly uncomfortable in front of a camera. I usually have a script. I'm not doing any of that today. I'm kind of doing a hockey guy kind of thing. More because I don't really have time to do like a heavily edited project. So we're going to go through all 32 teams, and we're going to see where everyone's at and where I think everyone, or how everyone will do this season. I have got a little plan in front of me, in that I have made a prediction, and I'm just going to go through each team one by one. I'm going to be using the Daily Face-Offs projected lines as my guide, and yeah, we're going to go through team by team. I'm going to try and keep it brief, because I know people will not watch 73-minute long videos. My last video just tanked in terms of audience retention. So I'm going to try and keep it to about a minute or two for each team. And, you know, that will still end up being around 60 minutes. I'm also going to have a beer because it's late now. And so we head over to the West. As again, I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up. I don't think I'm going to be surprising anyone with who I have bottom. So 16th in the West, I have the San Jose Sharks. Now, I think the Sharks have actually had a very good off-season. They've brought in, obviously they've brought in Celebrini. On top of that, they've brought in Tyler Toffoli, who I think is going to be a very good foil for Celebrini. You've got Will Smith coming up, and then Mikael Granlund. It was very good last season, and Fabian Zetterlund will be really pushing on with William Eklund. You've got Alex Wimberg, if he can recover his form from when he was with Seattle, rather than he had struggles at New York. And then Barclay Goodrow, obviously not particularly happy to be there, but he's a nice pickup. Their offensive group looks very good compared to what they were dealing with last year. Defense looks a lot less good. Cody Ceci on that top pairing, and Mario Ferraro. Jake Warman definitely improves the defensive group. Jan Rutter, Henry Front. I mean, a million-year-old Mark-Edward Vlasic, the last remnant of when the Sharks were good. That's not so great, and that's going to be the big issue for the Sharks. That defensive group. With that said, they've got an interesting situation with the goaltending, because they were the team that eventually pulled the trigger on Askarov. At the moment, they have Askarov as backup with Mackenzie Blackwood as number one, which does beg the question what they will do with Vitek Vanacek. Vanacek obviously had an absolute horror show of a season in New Jersey, and was pretty much the main reason the wheels came off the Devils. Blackwood last year, actually, I was very critical of Blackwood in the Vibes video, and that was probably quite unfair, because Blackwood actually did very well, had good stats considering he was being shelled all season. He kept them in a lot of games. I suspect that Blackwood will probably start the season. I would be very surprised if Askarov is given the reins right out the gate. One thing that somebody did mention was that Evgeny Nabokov is the goaltending coach at San Jose, so I think that's a good environment for Askarov to go into. I think the Sharks are going to be a much better team. However, they have to make up such a massive point gulf. I don't think they're going to be in the playoff picture at all. With that said, I don't think they'll finish last. I do sadly think Columbus will be the weakest team in the NHL this year, and that would be at least an improvement. unless they try and tank for the James Higgins sweepstakes to go with their Macklin, Celebrini and Will Smith, because that would be a freeway core that could very much be the groundwork for a kind of dynasty type team. As it stands, I have done the safe option and I have San Jose finishing last. And much as I did the safe thing by picking San Jose, I am also going to pick Chicago. However, unlike with the San Jose shout, I'm not so sure about Chicago. Like, they've brought in a lot of decent talent, old talent, but decent talent, with the likes of Bertuzzi, Teravainen, Taylor Hall, if he's fit all season. He was obviously injured most of last season. That was a huge disadvantage for Bedard. Andreas Athanasiou, I think, had problems with injuries last year. They should be a much better team, but the defense doesn't really give me a lot of hope. Vlasic and Seth Jones were a decent pairing last year. It was Vlasic really brought Jones on, and then you've got Mrazek and net. They're not terrible. They've definitely improved. I could see a situation where Chicago are getting closer to the playoff picture just because of the kind of veterans they've brought in. Laurent Brossoit, I think, is a great pickup, very underrated goalie. He could feasibly rotate with Peter Mrazek or even take the net off of Mrazek. I just don't think there's enough there, and I think they will finish 15th, which would be also a safe bet, I would suggest. So 14th in the West. 14th in the West, I am going to go for the Calgary Flames. The Flames they just don't seem to want to say they're going to rebuild. There's some weird issue, like, I don't know what they're doing now. Are they retooling? It's a real mess of a team. When I look at it, it's just such an odd selection of players. It's such a weirdly put together team now, and it just feels like a jigsaw that's been thrown on the floor. Yegor Sharangovich is a very good player. They had him playing with Jonathan Huberdeau at one point, and that seemed to work and get Huberdeau going a bit. The problem with Huberdeau is he's not a bad player, but he had that 115-point season, got a massive contract, and they're stuck with it. They're stuck with it because he's not done that. He's not replicated that since, and he's not shown that he's capable of replicating that. He's a bit like a Dubois-esque player, except that at least Huberdeau looks like he gives a shit. But yeah, like Walker Duo, that's an interesting one on the fourth line. Mackenzie Weegar's obviously a good player. Jake Bean's an alright defender. I mean, like Rasmus Anderson, nothing really excites me about this Calgary team. They're probably going to hand the reins over this year in goal to Dustin Wolf. They've got Daniel Vladar as a backup. Wolf is a very good player. I question how much help it's going to be for a young goalie to be behind this team. You know, there are people who say Calgary could make the playoffs. I think that's delusional. The best Calgary are going to do is going to be 14th, maybe 13th. They could potentially finish as high as, say, 11th or 10th, but it would probably be to their benefit if they actually did finish 14th, because they need to start doing a lot more through drafts and shifting what's left of this team. I mean, like somebody like Nazem Kadri could be something that somebody would pick up at the trade deadline. Although then again, contract wise, it's just they're a team that are very much handcuffed to the team that they've got. Of all the teams in the league, I find Calgary the most baffling. Like, I find it surprising that there are people who think this team could make the playoffs. Funnily enough, I was watching the SDP podcast this morning, and they sort of talked themselves into Calgary being a decent team. I don't really buy it. I've got them finishing 14th in the West. So 13th, I have the Anaheim Ducks, who will be sporting new jerseys this year. The Anaheim Ducks have been, I would argue, the most forgettable team in the league the last couple of years. They've had a couple of fast out of the gate starts, and then just completely dropped off the face of the earth. On paper, they've got a very good forward core. Zegras McTavish, Troy Terry, top line, very good. Cutter Gauthier, you know, he's down in the odds for the Calder Trophy. Leo Carlson and Alex Killorn as their second line. They're a decent team, decent forward core, but my word, that defense is just a disaster. I mean, I'm a big Radko Gudas fan. He's just been named captain. That's great. Cam Fowler's still kicking around a million years. You know, you've got Pavel Mintyukov, Jackson Lacombe. It's just not a very impressive group. Gudas, very entertaining defender to watch. Not great at defending at times. Can be miles out of position because he's gone off to try and lay a hit. It reminds me of a guy who used to play for the Leafs years ago, Garnet Exelby. And as a result, you can really see the seeds of the rebuild taking root in the offensive side of things, but defensively, it's a bit of a mess. And they took Beckett Seneke this year. They really need to start bringing in some defensemen. I mean, they lost Jamie Drysdale last year as well. They do have a very good prospects pool. I believe that they're ranked as the number 1 or number 2 prospects pool on most charts. I did say in my What to Watch video, I was wrong to give Anaheim such a low rating in my Vibes video because they are a team with a very bright future. I just think with this defense, with a goaltender that wants away in John Gibson, I just don't see them making a big jump this year. Okay, 12th. In 12th in the West, I have the St. Louis Blues. For a number of reasons, I'm not very high on the Blues. Again, they're a team that seems to lack an identity. They have some very good parts and pieces. As I said in the Vibes video, they have some very good parts that would be very serviceable on another team, but as a group together, they just feels like they fall short of being a realistic playoff contender. And that's exacerbated largely by having Jordan Binnington and Hoffa as their 2 netminders. Like, I think he started to show signs last year of like returning to form, but he's not come back to the kind of form he was in when they won the cup. Joel Hoffa, he's fine as a backup. I think he's got a few too many eccentricities about him that he makes me nervous. It was Joel Hoffa that was in net for Canada when Great Britain took the lead against them in the Worlds. Obviously, Torrey Krug is out, and that's probably for quite a long time. This whole team, like, the sum of the parts, it's like one of those, it's like they're almost less than the sum of the parts. You know, you hear the saying that you're more than the sum of your parts. They just feel less than. They feel like a bunch of very good players, but as a whole, it's not very good. Ryan Suter on defense, I mean, paid by half the Central Division and about 1 million years old now. Just very odd choice. Broberg, horrible overpay. I think that's more of a way to sort of give the Oilers a black eye than to actually improve the Blues. I've got them in 12th. They could finish as high as, let's say, 9th, but I don't think they're gonna be a particularly competitive team this year. 11th, I have Utah, the league's new boys, although not really. This is debut season for Utah. I'm very big on what Arizona had. I think, the likes of Clayton Keller, Barrett Hayton, Logan Cooley, Dylan Gumpfer, Josh Doan is a really good group of very exciting players coming through. I just think this year is going to be too soon for them, so I've got them missing out on the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised to see them there or thereabouts. They came into free agency with no defenders and did a fairly quick job putting together a fairly decent defense. Sergachev, Dursey, Valimaki, and Marino are fairly good defenders. Ian Cole as well. All just sort of serviceable players with the exception of Sergachev. He's a real nice pickup. Sean Dursey as well, being re-signed. The parts and pieces team are fine. I think they're a bit too young at the moment to be truly competitive. I like Connor Ingram. I'm not sure if he's a goalie that's going to take you very far. But again, I think give Utah a year or two, and I would be very surprised if they're not extremely competitive. I think it took Vegas 6 years to win the cup. Now, obviously, this isn't an expansion team, but I could see Utah being a competitor or a competitive team in like half that time. For now, I have Utah 11th. Okay, so my microphone decided to overheat, and I was also having issues with my camera, so it's now daylight, as you can see, but we're gonna get back at it, try and get this all polished off, so I don't have to think about doing any more preview stuff again this year. I had got to the 10th in the West, and my 10th in the West is going to be the Seattle Kraken. So Seattle, last year, kind of disappointed. A lot of people thought Seattle were going to push on. They had that kind of sophomore season where they made it to the playoffs. The thing about that season was they had extremely high shooting percentage as a team, which was pretty unsustainable. Jared McCann was a 40-goal scorer. He regressed to 29 goals last year. There's not a lot of supporting scoring in the Kraken team. This offseason, they've acquired Chandler Stevenson and they've acquired Brandon Montour on the back end. Both great players, but they've been signed onto extremely high contracts, and they are effectively serviceable workman-like players. Montour's actually quite a good defenseman. The problem with this team in its structure is it's a team of very good young, very good players, but they're all they feel like third liners with a smattering of talent, like second and first line talent. There doesn't feel like there's anyone other than Jared McCann. Matty Beniers had a week last season. They're kind of relying on Shane Wright having a big season. There's nothing there that screams quality through the whole of the lineup. Again, that defense as well. Brandon Montour, they've got on the second pairing with Jamie Alexiak. That third pairing looks pretty weak. There's nothing about the Seattle team that screams, we're going to make the playoffs, and that's my main issue. I know a lot of people fancy this Seattle team, but everything about them just feels mid. It feels like very mid players on a very mid team, and very mid goaltending, arguably less than mid goaltending. You've got Joey Decord and you've got Grubauer. I just don't see this team being better than the 9 teams I have ahead of them in the West. I see them as a better team than the weaker teams in the West, and because of that, they end up in my Western cone of uncertainty. I just don't see them pushing on and being a playoff team. I think that sophomore season was an outlier. I don't think anything they've brought in with the likes of Stevenson and Montour is going to overtly improve on what they achieved last season. And because of that, I don't see them being a much better team than last season. I see them remaining as a kind of middle-of-the-road Western team. And as a result, I have them in 10th. I don't think they're going to move much up or down from that. Now, in 9th place, I have quite a contentious pick. And I think a few of my takes in the West have been seen as a bit contentious. Bear in mind that games in the West start at like 3 or 4 a.m. in the UK. So I don't see a ton of Western teams live. I tend to watch them as live. I try and avoid seeing the scores. However, Winnipeg Jets, it's become a bit of a meme to underestimate the Winnipeg Jets. And so there's like either the people who think the Jets are going to be amazing this year, or at least repeat what they achieved last year. And then there are people like me who think the Jets are going to really struggle to make the playoffs this season. The problem with the Jets is they are completely dependent on Connor Hellebuck. And if Hellebuck gets injured or doesn't play as well as he did last year, they are going to really struggle. On top of that, they just completely derailed at the end of last season, and nobody seems to really be talking about that. You've got Kyle Connors stopped playing. He didn't stop playing. He wasn't doing it on purpose, but he lost his form. The team, as a result, didn't seem to know what to do with that top line. They kept juggling Scheifele, Ehlers, Kyle Connors around. Cole Buffetti, I think, was played up on the top line at one point. Gabe Velarde as well. They just didn't seem to know, under Rick Bowness, what to do with their team. I just don't think that Winnipeg always struggle in free agency because Winnipeg is one of the less desirable markets for a player to play in. So they've done very little in free agency other than lose McGrorty. Nikolai Ehlers, who's a great player. He's not wanting to re-sign this at the end of the season. And so, yeah, they are completely dependent on Connor Hellebuck being a Vezina-worthy goaltender. And that's the only way Winnipeg enjoy the kind of success they had last year. But on top of that, Scott Arniel has to figure out what to do with their top six, because they just didn't seem to know what to do with it last year, and none of the partnerships seemed to be working. I don't know if they've solved that. And on top of that, last year, Neil Pionk had issues, was really struggling. He was a close friend of Adam Johnson, who was the player who was killed in a British Elite League game. And so it's going to be interesting to see if this team can be as successful as last year. I strongly doubt it. I think they're going to regress quite significantly. They're in an extraordinarily tough division in the Central, and I just don't see enough in this team to meet what they did last year, or even come close to what they achieved last year. So I'm going to be in that part of the hockey zeitgeist that has Winnipeg regressing badly this year. And so we sidle into the playoffs and the playoff places in the West. And in 8th, I have a team I didn't really think was going to make the playoffs. When I was putting together my predictions, I quickly realised that while I do think the West is the stronger conference, I also think it's quite stratified. And the team that I really didn't fancy to make the playoffs because of a series of factors was Los Angeles. However, I do have Los Angeles making the playoffs. This is a big season for LA, and particularly Rob Blake. He has been at the helm for 8 years, and I don't believe LA have ever won a playoff series in that time. Their top scorer last season, I believe, was Trevor Moore. Andrei Kopitar is the Mount Rushmore player for LA now, but Kopitar's getting older. A lot of his advanced stats last year were starting to regress. Quinton Byfield had an absolutely breakout season, but he was playing on the wing. As a junior, he was a centre, and he was kind of brought in to be the future second-line centre to eventually assume the top line when Andrei Kopitar retires. So Byfield is moving into centre this year, and I sort of think there's a possibility his points totals regress, because as a centre you have to be a lot more defensively aware and defensively involved. So that really means that they need this top line of Laferriere, Kopitar and Kempe that's their leading line, and I just don't think that it's a particularly strong line. However, in the Pacific, it's really a question of, do I think LA are going to be worse than Seattle? No, I don't think they will be. Do I think Vegas are going to be streets ahead of LA? No, I don't. Artur Kaliev has just gone down with a pretty bad injury. There was already a lot of issues with Kaliev and LA. LA are a team that seem to have always struggled, especially with McClellan, of putting players in the right positions, or at least utilising them the way they should be utilised. They seem to expect people like Kaliev, Pierre-Luc Dubois to be extremely defensively minded players, and the truth of the matter is they aren't. They're luxury players. They're the players that you have on your team that are there to snipe goals. They're not there to be defensively minded. I mean, Dubois, he's a completely different story than Kaliev, but expecting that of a player like, say, Kaliev or Jeff Skinner is unreasonable. You've signed them. Kaliev, they've developed. They should know what they have. Alex Laferriere, he could take a big step this year. They need him to. Brant Clark is expected to make a big step this year. I think there's an expectation that Jordan Spence is going to take on a lot more responsibility on the defense, especially now that Drew Doughty's gone down with a broken ankle. Yeah, I think they're going to really struggle. I mean, the Joel Edmondson, I think, what have they signed him to? It's like over $3 million for a series of years, and they've got him sat on that third defensive pairing, and that's with Doughty down injured. I think this LA team is, what is it? I don't think it's a particularly good team. I think they will make the playoffs, and then they're going to face Edmonton, probably, and they'll go out again. And I'm just wondering, how long can they keep this cycle going with Rob Blake? Because I don't feel like they're moving forward, and I can actually see them being a weaker team this year than last year. Last year, they were great at the start of the season, while Edmonton were poor. And then they had that run through the new year where they were just absolutely dog shit. And that was what cost McClellan his job. This year, team just doesn't scream quality. And then you've got Darcy Kemper, who came back in the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, and Big Save Dave. Neither of those guys are guys I can see taking you deep into the playoffs. Just the whole team. There's a lot of these kind of teams in the West that feel very characterless or have issues with their team structures, and LA is just another one of them. I've got them in the playoffs. I can see them missing out and Winnipeg going in, but I think that would mean in my current predictions you would have 5 from the Central and 3 in the Pacific, which is unlikely. I know I've got that in the East as well, with 3 from one and 5 from the other, which actually has been quite rare in this playoff format, so the chances of that happening in both conferences is very slim. I think LA will make the playoffs, but I think they're going to be a brutal watch again, especially I don't think they'll be deploying the 1-3-1 that they were last year, but they're just going to be a very mid team. So 7th, that means I've got a team pretty much everyone else is cold on, and that's the always mediocre, middlest of the mid, Minnesota Wild. And that's possibly my spiciest take, although I've got a few. But why have I got Minnesota in 7th? Well, you've got Matt Boldy coming off a year where he was almost a point-a-game player. You've got Brock Faber in a second season where he's likely to kick on. You've still got Kirill Kaprizov. You've still got Matt Zuccarello, even though I was at the Olympic qualifiers, which Norway were at, and he is looking like he's a bit older these days. I still think Marcus Johansson is an okay player. I know the Wild fans aren't overly sold on him. Ryan Hartman as your number 1 centre is a bit of a problem. I like that third line of Foligno, Rossi and Trenin. The fourth line is a bit of a nightmare. You've got Jacob Middleton's just recently re-signed a contract. Jared Spurgeon is an underrated D-man. Yeah, you've still got Zach Bogosian on that third pairing. The big issue for Minnesota is what goaltending do they get? I said in my Vibes video that with this 14 million of retained contracts that Minnesota have, their number one thing when they get that off the books at the end of this year is they need to sort their goaltending out. I know everyone loves Marc-Andre Fleury. I know it's oh, what a great story. He's still going. He was a below 900 goalie last year, and it's looking like it's time. And on top of that, Philip Gustafsson was a below 900 goalie last year. I think collectively, Minnesota had the second or worst goaltending in the league, and had they had better goaltending, they would have probably been a playoff team, or certainly close to it. I think they were 11 points out in the end. Fleury will probably retire at the end of the season. There's questions about whether Jesper Wallstedt is ready. I don't see Gustafsson and Fleury being the future for Minnesota. I think next year, when this 15 million or 14 million comes off and the cap goes up, their number 1 target has got to be a goaltender. What they can pick up in free agency, well, I don't know. There's not going to be many options, I don't think, unless Shesterkin doesn't sign in. Either Shesterkin doesn't sign in New York or Swayman is still holding out. Who knows? But they need to get better in goal. And that's the one big weakness with my picking Minnesota to make the playoffs is the goaltending. I think everywhere else they're solid enough. And really, with the way that the NHL is these days, and in the cap era, being solid enough will get you into the playoffs. They've got a lot of good young pieces. I think by the end of the season, you're going to see Zeev Buium, after the NCAA season, come up into the Wild. And that'll be very interesting, especially if him and Faber get paired together. Yeah, I still think they'll make the playoffs. I think it will be predicated on Philip Gustafsson having a much better year than he did last year. That remains to be seen if that actually happens. I've got the Wild to get in the playoffs, and I know that that's not everyone's pick. In 6th, I have the only team I gave a F in my Vibes video, is the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, I'm not dogpiling on the Golden Knights. I know that a lot of the NHL fan base doesn't like them. They don't like them because of the way they keep utilising the LTIR loophole. It's there for everyone. I don't see a problem with that particularly. I just don't like Kelly McCrimmon. I don't like the way that they've run that team. I don't know why a player would want to sign with that team. I know in my Vibes video I talked about Logan Thompson being traded away 15 minutes before his autograph session. Apparently Thompson wanted away, so that's fair enough. Why do you want away though? And the net result last offseason was that a lot of players left and very little came back. Victor Olofsson was like their big signing, and he's probably going to be playing on their top line. He's an okay player. He's a very one-dimensional player. The Vegas Golden Knights are going to be dependent on Jack Eichel and Mark Stone staying fit. You've got Ivan Barbashev and Pavel Dorofeyev, who really did play quite well last year and came on a long way. They're still a likeable team in terms of playoff odds. And I did say in my Vibes video that every team in the that I have teams in the F tier that I expect to make the playoffs, and they were my only F tier team. I don't think that they've been seriously weakened. Well, no, let me correct that. I do think they've been seriously weakened, but they're still, you still look at that defense and think that's one of the best 6 in the league. Theodore, Pietrangelo, Hannafin, Haig, McNabb, and Whitecloud. It's definitely the best defensive core in the West, still, I believe. In goal, you've now got Aiden Hill. He won a cup. And, he's not the most spectacular goalie. He's not going to put up spectacular numbers, but he'll be good enough. You've got Ilya Samsonov, who was okay in Toronto. I mean, the problem is, if you're only okay in Toronto, you're going to take a lot of criticism. I think he's not too bad as a number 2. Aiden Hill isn't really a 1A. He's at best a 1B. You've now got kind of a guy who's probably a backup as your number 1 and a guy who's a backup as your number 2. I just don't think they're going to be particularly special, but they will make the playoffs, most likely. There was some talk on the Golden Knights, the Locked On Golden Knights podcast, and I try and listen to a lot of individual teams' podcasts because I was doing the research for my Vibes video. And there was some talk at one point of Bruce Cassidy losing the dressing room, so that might be an interesting story moving forward. I don't know if they have any reason to believe that. It's very unusual for team-specific podcasts to be throwing shade on their own team, though. So that might be something to watch out for this year, especially if they get off slow, especially if they do lose Eichel or Stone. They're going to be an interesting team to watch this year. And I do still suspect they'll be a playoff team, but I don't think they're going to do much if they get to the playoffs. In 5th, I have the Colorado Avalanche, which is another one of my sort of spicy takes. Funny story, I actually broke my Vibes video up into 32 shorts, or at least I'm trying to. 31, sorry, I decided not to do Columbus. Even though they got a fair number of views, as I don't like making shorts. The Colorado one was the only one that got overwhelmingly downvoted and got the only comment. It's partly because I don't really think this Colorado team's great. Now, you might think you're an idiot when you look at Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Ranta, Cale Makar, and Taves. You put that line out, they can score against anyone in the league. The problem I have with the Avs is twofold. They have no depth. Actually, it's threefold. They have no depth up front. They have a load of cap kind of stuck in stasis to see if Gabe Landeskog comes back. Nichushkin is expected to come back. That's frozen them in the off-season. And you're also one injury away from then losing everything. Like, if you lose McKinnon, if you lose Cale Makar, you are a significantly weaker team. And then threefold, you've got to rely on Georgiev. Georgiev can be an okay regular season goaltender, but that's all he is, even at the best. He's not going to win you a Stanley Cup, and he's not a goalie you can pin your hat on in any kind of way. And because they have this issue with Landeskog and Nichushkin, and with Landeskog, it would be amazing if he could come back. But he's been out 2 years now, and if he does come back, he's coming back to $7 million a year. Obviously, I believe that gets downscaled if you don't play the whole season. But because they have all this tied up, they've not been able to do or address that goaltending situation. Now, Georgiev could be a good 1A in an A-B kind of partnership. And the goalies out there this year that you could have taken a swing at if you had some money in the bank, like you had Askarov, you had Brossois, both could have been very serviceable number 2s. Instead, Francouz has retired, and their number 2 is going to be, I believe it's, Justus Anunen, who really didn't get given much opportunity last year. And that's the other thing with Georgiev. He might be a more serviceable goalie if he doesn't have to play so much. He played a ton last year, and I just don't think at the moment with that goaltending you can expect too much from this team. They've been, I think, the second best team in the last 5 years in terms of points behind Boston. They're still going to be a solid team, but with the way that some of the other teams in their division have tooled up, I find it very difficult to believe they will be as adamantine strong as they have been in the last few years. In fourth, I have Vancouver. Vancouver are a team that really surprised everyone last year. No one was really expecting Vancouver to be even a playoff team last year, let alone challenge for the President's Trophy. However, a lot of why they were where they were was a bit like Seattle the year before getting into the playoffs, is there was some very unlikely statistics. Like Brock Besser had a massive jump in his advanced stats last year, and the tendency is for players to regress to the mean. Now, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he carries that on this year. And if he does, they will be well placed to again challenge for a President's Trophy. Elias Pettersson really struggled at the end of last season. They really need him to come back in his kind of early season form. They've brought in Danton Heinen, Jake DeBrusk, very good players to bring in. They will make that team stronger. That third line I really like, Höglander, Bluger, Connor Garland. They're a team that has okay depth, and okay depth is enough for you to be a challenger in the NHL these days. The cap, the way it is, nobody has got 4 great lines. The best you can hope for is a decent third line, and Vancouver have one of the better third lines in the league, I believe. In defence, you've obviously got Quinn Hughes. They've brought in Derek Forbort and Vincent Descharnay. They're 2 very good shutdown kind of penalty kill defensemen. They have, however, lost Zadorov and Cole, who are probably better defensemen in terms of 5-on-5. It'll be interesting to see how it manifests itself, because now you have Carson Soucy and Tyler Myers as your second pair, and Soucy's okay, but Myers, I don't really rate. He always looks slow on the ice. And obviously the big story for Vancouver is, do they get last season's Thatcher Demko, or do they even get Thatcher Demko? Because at the moment he's injured, and he seemed to be struggling with injuries toward the end of last season. And that was another thing last year. Vancouver were extremely fortunate with injuries until it got to the playoffs, and then they rode Arturs Shilovs. And Shilovs looked like a good goalie, and everyone's like really talking him up. But it's important to note he's still a career below 900 goalie in the NHL. He's only a few years removed from playing ECHL and Latvian league hockey. That's not to say he won't be a good goalie. I think he showed he's a very good netminder. He's not a starter though, and I don't think he really projects as a starter, which means you're desperate for Demko to be your number 1 through the season, and it's looking increasingly unlikely he will be. And that for me would be a worry for Vancouver, because if Demko is injured for a significant amount of time, if you don't get the Brock Besser of last year, and if you get the kind of end of last season at Elias Pettersson, they're going to be like way off where I've got them in 4th. However, the odds on all 3 of those things happening is pretty slim. And I do still think they will do fine in the Pacific with the way that Vegas have dropped off, with the state that LA are in, and the makeup of the Seattle Kraken. I think Vancouver will finish 2nd in the Pacific, unless something really unusual happens. And if they finish 2nd in the Pacific, they'll probably finish 4th in the West. Oh yeah, I should mention also, they've also got Daniel Sprong, and he is a fascinating player. Born in Amsterdam, actually played a lot of his junior hockey in the Netherlands until moving to Canada, I think when he was about 9 or 10, which is fascinating in itself, because as a Brit, the Netherlands are quite a long way behind us in the world rankings. Last time we played the Netherlands, we beat them 14-0. So I've always kind of enjoyed seeing Sprong. I'm a big fan of players from obscure countries, especially when they played some junior hockey there. I think Jordan Spence might have played some of his junior hockey in Japan. Sprong is being paid less than $1 million. And there's a lot of stories about Sprong that he's a problematic character, because he puts up good numbers every year and yet he gets bounced around. It'll be interesting to see how he does. I think the thing with Sprong, he's always going to put up goals. He's never going to do anything defensively. He could be a real crucial part of whether the Canucks do well or not, and he really has to sort out his character, because he's a guy who should be being paid considerably more. When you've got Joel Edmondson in LA being paid over $3 million a year, and you've got Daniel Sprong in Vancouver being paid less than $1 million, it's a character thing with Sprong, and if he can sort that out, maybe he can finally hang on a team for more than a cup of coffee and actually get his bag, because he deserves it at this point. except for his personality, apparently, because that's every report on him. I'm not an insider, obviously. I'm sitting here in Scotland, but everything I've read about Sprong is character. And I find it fascinating that you must have some kind of ego when you get to the NHL and you're a second line type player and you manage to piss everyone off so much that you just continually shoot yourself in the foot financially. Just swallow it and play, because you're a good player. Okay, third in the West, I have the Nashville Predators. The Predators were, and I don't think I need to really tell anyone this, the team that took the biggest swing in free agency. They brought in three of the biggest names on most people's free agency board in Steve Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, and Brady Shea. Trotz pivoted because of the way they played towards the end of last season. After that whole debacle with the U2 concert in Vegas, they pivoted towards now really going for it. And the thing is, a lot of people are talking about the ages of these players and the terms. What you got to remember is Trotz didn't sacrifice anything. He's not giving away prospects. He's not giving away picks. He's added like 90 goals to the lineup. I still question the decision to sign in Scott Wedgwood rather than going with Askarov. If you have plans to go deep in the playoffs, you probably want to go with a more veteran goaltender like Wedgwood. And I also don't think Askarov was happy sitting behind Saros for forever. But this Nashville team now, you have Philip Forsberg on that top line, Gustav Nyquist. They've got Stamkos and Marchessault on the second line, so they're going to basically be a two-line team. Luke Evangelista last year was very underrated. He looked good in the playoffs. Colton Sissons as well. In my opinion, he's my favourite goalie in the league in UC Saros. And my main reason is I played in goal. I'm 5'8". These days, you just don't see goalies that are short anymore. I grew up with my heroes being people like Fred Brathwaite and, guys who were like short and playing in the NHL. That style just has gone. And Saros, even though he's not short, he's still taller than me. He's like one of the final bastions of short goaltenders. So I'm a big Saros fan, and I do think he's one of the best goalies in the league as well. And he's kind of in his prime years. And I believe that like bringing in the likes of Stamkos, Marchessault, Shea, along with Roman Jussi being right at the end of his career, they've got maybe a 2-year at best window. But I genuinely think this is one of the cup contenders. If I was to give you a list of actual cup contenders, Nashville would be one of mine. I think I've got 10 teams I think could win a cup this year. Maybe 9. I'd say 9. Teams I think could win a cup this year, and Nashville are one of them. They've really made a jump. The only thing is, are Stamkos and Marchessault at their age going to stay fit? Stamkos has missed very few games in recent years. I don't think Marchessault has missed a lot either. There's no reason to think they won't be. And Philip Forsberg was great last year, a really brilliant player. Ryan O'Reilly's a very serviceable number one center. They're going to be a very good team, and this is my main reason for having Colorado in 5th, because I think this Nashville team have made a considerable jump. Now, a lot of people don't think they have, and time will tell. This is predictions. That's what a prediction is. I've got them finishing in 3rd. Time will tell if I'm right. Okay, second in the West. Second in the West, I have the Dallas Stars. Now, I was going to put Dallas first, and Dallas are one of the teams I really do think have a very good chance of winning a Stanley Cup. Part of the reason for that is last year they had 7 players score 20 goals or more, which is brilliant depth scoring. And even though Joe Pavelski has retired, they still have Jason Robertson, they still have Wyatt Johnson, Mason Marchment, Jamie Benn, Matt Duchene, Tyler Seguin, Rope Hintz. You've got Logan Stankoven, who's likely to take a step on this year. You've got Maverick Bourque coming up into the big team. This team has arguably the strongest top 3 lines offensively in the league. But why I don't have them first is because losing Tanev and what they've brought in makes that Dallas backend look really weak. And it gives me major Maple Leafs of last season vibes, in that the Maple Leafs had 2 very solid offensive lines, but they had nothing in defense. This Dallas team feels very much like that as well. Best top 3 lines offensively in the league, as far as I'm concerned. You've still got Miro Heiskanen and Thomas Harley, who are 2 of the best defensemen in the league as well. However, you're needing Matt Dumba to really step up now he's in a competitive market. And Ilya Lyubushkin as a second-line partner for Thomas Harley, that gives me the fear. Don't think that's a great partner for Harley. But the other option is that you pair Heiskanen and Harley and then grit your teeth when they're not on the ice. In goal, you've got Ottinger and Casey DeSmith. Ottinger is a guy who probably doesn't need to be brilliant most nights when you've got the kind of offensive firepower in front of you. He's a guy who was up and down last season. If he can remain consistent, this is going to be a very good Dallas Stars team. If he can remain consistent, it's a big question. Casey DeSmith, fine. He's a fine backup. Nothing special. They've replaced Scott Wedgwood with another Scott Wedgwood, effectively. Very serviceable backup, career backup. So long as Jake Ottinger stays healthy, that'll be fine as a group. They don't need amazing goaltending. If you took the very mediocre goaltending that they have in LA and put it in Dallas, I would still have Dallas as the second best team in the West. They don't need to be remarkable in goal. However, they might need to be slightly more remarkable than last year when they have what they have in front of them now, with that Tanev loss and Dumba and Lyubushkin. In defense of Matt Dumba, I do think he is going to come on this year, and I think him and Heiskanen will be fine. Dumba kind of has gone into that inertia of playing on nothing teams. I know he went at the trade deadline last year to Tampa, I think, so it was a bit more meaningful, but even then Tampa were kind of flapping in the breeze, and before that obviously he was in Arizona, which was just a dumpster fire because of the ownership. I think he will make a step this year. Looking at that third group, Esa Lindell, Nils Lundqvist, it's not terrible. And I still think that they'll be fine. I've got them in second. And so obviously in first, I have the losing Stanley Cup finalists, the Edmonton Oilers. Do I think the Edmonton Oilers are as good as the Dallas Stars offensively? No. Picking up Victor Arvidsson and Jeff Skinner is really nice pickups. I would argue that the top two lines for Edmonton are stronger than Dallas's top two lines, but as a three-line group, again, Matthias Janmark, Adam Henrique, Connor Brown, very good. Very good. I would say there's not much between Dallas and Edmonton in their top three. Defensively, do I think Edmonton are better than Dallas? No, I don't. Losing Broberg and Cody Ceci was a contentious player last year, was very poor in the playoffs, was possibly their weakest link in their run to the Stanley Cup finals. But I do think you've got Matthias Ekholm, you've got Evan Bouchard. Darnell Nurse isn't a bad defender, he's just on a bad contract, and that exacerbates things. Ty Emberson, a lot of people are talking him up. I didn't see him play a lot for San Jose. Is he going to be better than Cody Ceci? Who knows? If you're a Sharks fan, comment down below. I don't have a clue. A lot of people are talking him up. I think a lot of Edmonton fans are trying to tell themselves this defense isn't as bad as it is. But Darnell Nurse is a fine player. Brett Kulak and Josh Brown isn't great. I don't think it's very good. I've heard a lot of people saying that they'll be fine, and they might be. I don't think that there's much to write home about. Do I think Edmonton are better in goal than Dallas? Marginally. I do believe they are better in goal. I think Stuart Skinner takes a lot of shit. And I think people forget that he's playing in one of the most difficult markets. And he's quite young for a starting goalie. And he showed remarkable resilience in bouncing back in the playoffs when he lost the net. Calvin Pickard, another career backup, just the same as what they're doing in Dallas. Another career backup. Came in and kind of did okay in the playoffs, which is all you would expect a backup to do. It's the same matchup. It's not like, funnily enough, all of the three big teams in the West are running a goalie tandem that is very much, you've got your starter and you've got your backup. Dallas, Edmonton, Nashville, Vancouver, assuming Demko comes back, although they might rotate him with Shilovs if he is struggling with an injury, and Colorado, for some reason, Georgiev seems to be their guy. But do I think Edmonton will do better than Dallas this season? Yes. I think that the Dallas Stars are in a harder division. I think Edmonton have a lot less competition in their division. I think Anaheim, Calgary, and San Jose are all quite weak teams. I think Utah, St. Louis, and Chicago, as a comparison to those teams, are much better. Dallas are going to have harder games. So I believe Edmonton will win. And so that just brings me to my final set predictions. In what 9 teams do I think can win a Stanley Cup? Well, in the East, I think Toronto can. I think Florida can. I would argue Boston if Swayman signs, but I don't know if that's going to happen. I believe New Jersey can, and I think the Rangers can. So I have 4 teams in the East because I'm not sure about Boston. In the West, I think you've got Dallas, you've got Nashville, you've got Colorado, you've got Edmonton, and you have Vancouver. Who do I think will make the finals? Because of Toronto's history, I just can't see them making a final. There's something about them when it comes to the playoffs, they implode. And again, I'm not that convinced about their goaltending. Florida, will they have the drive this year? I don't know. They certainly still have a team that could do it. Again, I wonder if Bob's going to be as the Bob of last year or the bad Bob. New Jersey, I've taken a bet on them making the final, possibly a wild take. It all hinges, like in Florida, on whether you have the Markstrom, a good Markstrom or a bad Markstrom, and whether they can stay fit. New York, kind of last chance saloon for this group. Again, very much dependent on whether the old guys come back, your Kreiders, your Zibanejads and your Panarins, and can they play like they played last year, and can they get the support they need with the likes of Leferrier? I think if they do, the Rangers have a very good chance. Whoever makes it from the East, the benefit the East has is their playoffs just don't seem to be as bruising and draining as the West's, because I think the West has stronger teams. I would argue Dallas, Nashville, Edmonton, Vancouver, Colorado. 5 teams possibly better placed than anyone in the East in terms of their playoff ability. Vancouver, maybe not so much. Nashville, certainly with the players they've brought in. Edmonton obviously did it last year. Dallas were disappointing, I think, in the playoffs. It's a gunfight in the West. And by the time you make the finals, you've had to go through the mill. Even though I have Edmonton finishing first in the West, my final prediction for the finals is Dallas to play New Jersey. So you can probably bet both those teams will somehow miss the playoffs. And with that, I'm going to the pub. If you enjoy this content, I know it's not the best content. I know I prefer to be a heavy editing kind of guy. If you enjoy seeing my face, God knows why, but tell me down below. Leave a comment on what you think about my predictions. Tell me I'm an idiot. That seems to be what I usually get. Never get anything positive. Like and subscribe. I know I've asked at the end of my videos. It really does help if you enjoy my stuff. Please like and subscribe. A huge chunk of my viewers are not subscribed, and it really helps get seen in the algorithm. And share it everywhere. Show people how bad Brits are at predicting hockey stuff. I've said at the end of my videos, I am trying to get this vlog that I did in Denmark for the Olympic qualifiers finished. I have 4 days until I go back to sea. I'm probably not going to get it finished if I'm 100% honest. I'm still trying to work on getting these bloody shorts edited to get them out as they're getting views, but I will try and do it. If not, I'll probably do it while I'm at sea and post it when I get home. And with that said, I'm going to sea now for the next 2 months. I'll be trying to watch the hockey wherever I can, but enjoy your first third of the season, as I'm going to be moving home as well, which is why it's so sparse behind me at the moment. I'm in the process of moving home, so God knows when I'm going to get a chance to actually make another video. Enjoy your first third of the season, enjoy the hockey, and until next time, whenever that is, I don't know. These outros, I've not figured it out yet.